The world's first megalopolis. Imagine standing at the center of the known world. Not a ruin. Not a textbook illustration. The real thing, breathing, roaring, and alive. The year is 100 AD. And the city stretching endlessly before you is Rome, a metropolis of over 1 million souls at a time when most of humanity had never seen a settlement larger than a modest market town. This was not merely a city. It was a statement. A civilization's most audacious declaration that human ambition had no ceiling. Streets of volcanic stone radiated outward in every direction. Aqueducts carried fresh water across hundreds of miles of conquered landscape. Monuments of marble and travertine rose so high they carved shadows across entire neighborhoods below. No city on Earth, in the entire recorded history of human civilization up to this moment, had ever looked like this. And yet, almost none of it survived. What you are about to witness is an AI-powered reconstruction of ancient Rome at the precise height of its power, rebuilt from centuries of archaeology, scholarship, and architectural evidence, frame by frame, stone by stone. This is not what historians imagined Rome looked like. This is what it actually was. What did it actually look like? Most of us have seen the ruins. The cracked columns of the Roman Forum. The hollow shell of the Colosseum. The fractured remnants of temples that once made emperors feel like gods. But ruins are a lie, or rather, they are an incomplete truth. They show you the skeleton of a world without its flesh, its color, or its breath. Because here is what the history books rarely tell you. Rome in 100 AD was not white. It was not silent. It was not empty. Those marble facades were painted in deep reds, vivid yellows, and rich ochres. The streets were deafeningly loud, filled with the clatter of iron cart wheels on stone, the calls of fishmongers and spice traders, the arguments of senators and the laughter of children chasing each other through narrow, sun-drenched alleyways. The skyline was not a flat horizon of broken columns. It was a dense, vertical, overwhelming spectacle, insulated apartment blocks rising 6 and 7 stories above the street level, competing for light and space in a city that never stopped growing. This reconstruction does not give you the ruins of Rome. It gives you Rome itself, precisely as it existed when it stood at the absolute summit of human civilization. Are you ready to see it? The architecture of power. Let us begin where Rome announced itself most boldly, its architecture. In 100 AD, the Emperor Trajan sat at the height of imperial authority, and the city itself reflected his ambition in stone, marble, and engineered perfection. The Colosseum, completed just 2 decades earlier, stood as the undisputed crown jewel of the Roman skyline. But this reconstruction reveals something the ruins cannot. It was not the weathered, gap-toothed amphitheater we photograph today. It was a seamless, towering oval of travertine limestone, its exterior adorned with engaged columns of 3 distinct architectural orders, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, stacked in precise, breathtaking symmetry, rising nearly 50 meters above the Roman street. And that was merely the beginning. The Forum of Trajan, still under construction in 100 AD, was redefining what civic architecture could dare to become. Its vast colonnaded plaza, its towering basilica, and the soaring column of Trajan recording military conquest in spiraling carved relief, all of it formed an urban complex so ambitious it left even Romans speechless. The Pantheon. The Circus Maximus. The Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus dominating the Capitoline Hill. This was not a city that built monuments. This was a city that was a monument. The streets and the people. But pull your gaze downward now, away from the soaring monuments and into the streets themselves. Because Rome was not built for emperors alone. At street level, the city revealed its truest, most extraordinary character. The Via Sacra, Rome's most sacred processional road, pulsed daily with a human tide unlike anything the ancient world had ever produced. Senators in white togas trimmed with purple moved alongside slaves carrying market goods on their backs. Soldiers freshly returned from the frontiers of Germania and Britannia pushed through crowds of Egyptian merchants haggling over bolts of imported silk. The smell alone would have been overwhelming. Freshly baked bread from the city's hundreds of thermopolia, Rome's answer to the street food stall, mingled with the sharp tang of garum, the fermented fish sauce that flavored almost every Roman meal. Perfume shops competed with the acrid smoke of metalworkers' forges. Fountains fed by 11 separate aqueduct systems murmured at nearly every street corner, providing fresh water to citizens who had no plumbing of their own. Over 1 million people called this city home in 100 AD. They were not background figures in a historical painting. They were architects, poets, criminals, healers, and dreamers, living ordinary lives inside the most extraordinary city ever built. The cost of empire. Yet beneath the spectacle, something darker breathed. For all its breathtaking grandeur, Rome in 100 AD was a city of profound and violent contradiction, and this reconstruction does not flinch from that truth. The same streets that carried senators and philosophers also carried the chained columns of enslaved human beings, marched in from conquered territories across 3 continents. Scholars estimate that nearly 400,000 slaves lived within Rome's city boundaries alone, a third of the entire urban population, forming the invisible foundation upon which every monument, every banquet, and every triumph was built. The towering insulae apartment blocks that defined Rome's dramatic skyline told their own story of inequality. While the wealthy inhabited spacious ground-floor residences with private courtyards and mosaic floors, the poor were packed into upper stories so structurally unstable that building collapses were a routine, accepted feature of Roman urban life. Fire was a constant, consuming terror. Political violence moved through the city's corridors of power like a persistent current, emperors assassinated, rivals poisoned, dynasties erased overnight. Rome in 100 AD was simultaneously the greatest achievement in the history of human civilization and a system sustained by suffering on an industrial scale. The marble was real. The glory was real. And so was the cost. The beginning of the long decline. And here is the haunting truth that makes this reconstruction truly extraordinary. The Rome you are witnessing, this roaring, overwhelming, magnificent city at the absolute peak of its power, was already dying. Not visibly. Not dramatically. Not in any way that a Roman citizen walking the Via Sacra in 100 AD could have possibly detected. But the fractures were there, written into the very foundations of the empire's impossible ambition. The year 100 AD marked the reign of Trajan, widely considered the greatest of all Roman emperors. And yet historians recognize this precise moment as the high water mark. The point after which the trajectory, almost imperceptibly at first, began to curve downward. The empire had reached the outer limits of what it could militarily hold and economically sustain. Supply lines stretched across thousands of miles of hostile terrain. The cost of maintaining frontier legions was quietly bleeding the imperial treasury. Political succession, always Rome's most dangerous vulnerability, grew increasingly unstable with each passing generation. The streets in this reconstruction look eternal. The monuments appear indestructible. But within 3 centuries, those same streets would fall silent. The aqueducts would run dry. The forums would empty. And the greatest city the ancient world had ever produced would slowly, irreversibly fade into the landscape it had once so completely dominated. From ruins to reconstruction. And so we arrive at the most profound question this reconstruction asks. What do we do with a world that has vanished? For centuries, Rome existed only in fragments, in the fractured columns half buried beneath Renaissance streets, in the faded frescoes of abandoned villas, in the obsessive writings of archaeologists and historians who dedicated entire lifetimes to reassembling a puzzle with 10,000 missing pieces. But something remarkable has happened. Through the convergence of artificial intelligence, archaeological scholarship, and architectural forensics, we can now do what no previous generation of historians could have imagined. We can rebuild Rome, not as a guess, not as an artistic impression, but as a rigorously evidenced, visually immersive reconstruction that places you directly inside a world that ceased to exist 15 centuries ago. Every colonnade you have witnessed in this reconstruction is positioned where the archaeological record places it. Every street reflects the documented urban geography of Trajanic Rome. Every face in that crowd represents a real demographic reality of a real living city. This is not nostalgia. This is resurrection. Rome in 100 AD was the summit of everything human civilization had yet achieved, a city of impossible beauty, staggering contradiction, and profound, echoing humanity. It faded away once. Thanks to AI reconstruction, it never has to again.